it's Matt here, and welcome to the beginning of May / post Black Country Brick Show vlog. So obviously this is going to go through a large amount of some of it being the sort of post show notes and a few other bits and pieces. So firstly, the show went really well. We've raised about 4,000 and something in money for the Birmingham Children's Hospital charity, which is always good news. Things went really well. The Tombola ran out of prizes by midday, or just after midday, so that's not a good look in some respects. But obviously, that shows you how successful it was. So maybe next year it possibly might need to be moved slightly further away from the entrance, so it's actually got time to, keep up. And more prizes required, obviously. I did bring a few to donate, but obviously I didn't get time to go to the Tombola before it finished, so I went around one, and it's like, I've got these for them, but it's finished. Not a lot I can do. So they're being kept till next year. I'm going to get rid of some of the other poly bags and other sets as Tombola prizes. Now, obviously I could sell them, but from my perspective, I've had them for 3. I'm not really that interested in keeping them. I gave one of my friends got married last month in April, and as one of the gifts I gave them one of the caveman sets that came out. So I thought that was quite ironic if I'm getting married, it's caveman and cave woman. So regarding my display at the show itself, that went reasonably okay. The prep for it, I've been prepping for it, as most people who watch this, my vlogs and watch the channel, know that I've been in constant state of, I wouldn't say stress and worry, but apprehension about actually going to the displaying and the show, sort of getting ready for the show. Now, I was still getting ready for the show at something like 7:30 on the day, when really we should have been out the door and getting on the way or getting the lift to the show. So I think that didn't go down well. The original plan was to get a taxi or something like that on a Friday, so I could take most of the stuff to the show and then set it up at the show on the Friday evening. So that would be pretty much the box which contains most of the road and base plates for the track, and then a few other bits and pieces. I then take the rest of it tomorrow, which would be a lot less. And that didn't work out because taxis on a Friday in the afternoon were ridiculously expensive. You're looking at £45-50 for an Uber, and even going to somewhere cheaper, such as a taxi firm or something like that, was still really expensive. The estimate was about 25 to 30 on one taxi firm, something like that, and they were trying to bill me for like 35 to 40. It's just like, well, you've estimated this, but yet you're billing me for this. It's just like didn't seem to make sense. So in the end, I just canned it and just focused on doing some preparation. So on Saturday morning, I woke up and was actually rebuilding a pair of crossovers so that they would actually fit into the display. I also soldered some track feeds up, and once that was all done, it all got bungled in the car. I got a lift off my sisters to go to the show, unloaded everything, set everything up. I then immediately realised I'd not brought any risers pieces to actually support the track. I was also a 16x32 straight module missing. Now, obviously, I've not built that. It's missing because I left it at home. It's missing because I haven't built it. So luckily, being the thought plan of the time, I actually took with me some spare 9-volt track and some straight track and some curve track and all that sort of stuff, so that I could finagle it while at the show. So obviously I'd got enough to actually build a display, but I hadn't got any pieces to support the track. Now, obviously, by the time I'd done most of the setup, it was after 9:30, and 9:30 was kind of like a soft opening. So what I did was, one of the traders was in the same area, so I just literally went to them, grabbed a pick-a-brick cup, because I was doing some like pick-a-brick cup for however much it was, and it was a reasonably good price, and I literally went to town and just went, and that'll do. Bought it, went to the display, put it into the display, so at least I could run trains. So obviously by the time I'd set up the display, it's already 9:30. post 9:30, pretty much 10 o'clock for when it's actually opening. So we're kind of running. I'm running behind schedule. Is the polite version of it. To be frankly honest, it was supposed to be 9. I was supposed to have 9 volt. I'd got all the stuff to do 9 volt. I got some pliers, got some, snips, got some voltmeter and all this sort of stuff. And some all the stuff I'd required to make it electric. But the problem is that I'd not got enough time to rebuild the modules with the wiring and wire them up ready for 9 volt while I was at the show. So what happened is that I started off using my black Ager oil electric, which was supposed to be the 100-ton 600 horsepower version, and it didn't go quite to plan because I've actually got it here, and as you can see, it's quite a big loco. It's very heavy, as you'd expect, because it's got 2 old school 9 volt motors in it. It's a rechargeable battery box, and originally it had a power functions V2 receiver in it, and you can actually sort of see the hole in the roof there next to the exhaust stacks. So this was on the layout first. It had a bit of charge. I'd put it on charge for a bit so it would actually have some juice, and so I wasn't sure what state the battery was in. So I got it onto the layout, was running a few trains, and it was working okay. But the problem is that when it went over a crossover or going around the corner, it actually was pulling the cars to the side because the couplers were mounted onto the body here, just about here, not the trucks. So the trucks were free to spin like this, no problem. But the coupler was mounted here. It was mounted to the body, so underneath the body, so there. So it would start to go around the corner. The coupler would go to the maximum it would, and then because the coupler and the loco were maximum the maximum they could get over, what was happening was the coupler on the wagon it was pulling was trying to then compensate, and it was pulling the wagon out off the track to then go around the corner. It didn't work very well. So it lasted about half an hour to 45 minutes with the black one, and then after that I went, enough's enough. Brought out the orange and green Alco high hood, which is actually off camera over there, sort of somewhere, and then used that for the rest of the show. Once I got to the show, booted the phone up, went to control the train, and the loco kept sort of dropping the Wi-Fi connection for some strange reason. So I had to go and update the firmware on that. Once I got the firmware updated, it went smooth as butter. As much as it could at the time. So obviously I've got effectively one loco I can use, and that was all I did for the rest of the show. It was pretty much just shuffle cars to and from, sort of on screen to off screen, and then back again and that sort of stuff, and then moving everything around. So it was a logic puzzle, and obviously because it's on loco fighty and it's got sound and lights and that sort of stuff, I was also doing that as well. So using the backup and doing this, that, and the other. So that kind of went well from that perspective, but I'd gone with 4 locos, and out of the 4, the usable was 1. So 25% of what I bought as a loco was usable. And to be honest with you, I really should have left the 9 volt at home and just gone. I ain't got time, the control. Obviously, I'll be bringing the track because the layout was based on 9 volt, but obviously the electrics and all that sort of stuff could have left them behind. Would have saved some space in storage. And I just wouldn't have had to, all that stress and worry for trying to set the 9 volt up. Now moving on from that, the display wasn't brought in a complete state. Obviously it was still a work in progress, and there's a few bits missing and a few bits that could be improved. So primarily, and this is in no particular order, it really could do with the wider radius crossovers that FX Bricks are bringing out later this year. That was plainly obvious in the way some of the rolling stock was going around curves. Now, while it is not essential, I would say, for the sidings to the industries to have those nice wide curves, I really would like the crossovers at a minimum to be those, because they're the biggest things I'm using. And it was very obvious that while the brick model road of tank cars and hoppers and that sort of stuff were all to cope with the R40 crossovers I'd got, they really look better on wider radius curves, and it would really suit the layout to have those wider radius curves. Now, I did ask a question on the Eurobricks forums about that, and it's gone unanswered at the moment. Now, the current schedule for that, as it was, now I use that sort of star sort of thing as it was, because the original schedule has slipped at minimum a month to 2 months behind. So from that perspective, although it was summer 2022, I would expect that to sort of be in the June, July sort of area. And with these delays and that sort of stuff, and the fact that although the prototype switches have been produced, and there's been videos of that and about them working, I would assume that they're still being quality controlled and some refinements being done. Now that's why I'll probe the question on the Eurobricks thread is that, can confirm they're being released for summer, because that's effective on the display now. Is that I don't want to display it until these new turnouts are available, because with the new turnouts it means the locos and rock trains perform better, and I actually gain a little bit in terms of head shunts, and then I can rebuild the display or expand it or change it as required to fit the turnouts in. But obviously we've not had anything, so who knows. The other thing really, rolling stock was okay. I really need to focus on the buildings. Now the buildings, the buildings were sort of like, if trains are here and the road is here and cars, like freight cars, passenger cars were here, and you'd got road vehicles here, the buildings were sort of like there-ish, in terms of priority, so they weren't very high in priority. And it shows. Now, the warehouse I'd got of the corner module complete is actually underneath the desk behind me. Or complete in terms of it sort of looks okay and it's sort of there. That needs a rebuild because I need to change the naming on it. And I forgot to bring it, to be honest. It was just plain sort of like it's under the desk and I completely forgot. So that's been thought about. The other big thing really is locos, and obviously I need to do the 9-volt wiring. But the big thing really is the locos. So this is, as you've seen before, this is the Ager Oil Electric. It's a 100-ton model. It's supposed to represent the 100-ton 600 horsepower version. Now I had got decals for it that were produced by OK Brickworks for it as Long Island 401. So it would have Long Island, if I can grip this properly without it falling apart. So it would have Long Island sort of in the middle here, and then it'd have 401 at the end. Now, obviously that's actually wrong because on the real thing it was 401 at both ends with Long Island in the middle, and it was the same the other side. That is intentional. So it would have like 401 at the end here underneath the cab window, Long Island at the top here, and then you'd have another 401 at this end, and then obviously you'd have an A end or B end somewhere. Pretty much based on where the bell is, I think. And the underframe detail is slightly different, but the problem is there's not a lot of information about them, so obviously it's fact finagled a little bit. So what is happening to the oil electric and why is it, in pieces? Long story short, it's getting rebuilt back. Now it started off as a 60-ton 300 horsepower version, and she's going back into that sort of configuration. I've got the LTD version back up. For those of you who have been with the channel a long time, you will recall that I did actually produce a clone copy of, I think it was Justin Tan's version, with the chain drive and that sort of stuff, and the chain drive would literally just throw itself apart at the slightest hint of trouble. Now I would have fixed those issues with some modified hinge rocker pieces where I've cut the rocker piece off, and those actually work fine on the bogies now. The bogies don't fall apart at all, but again, it's not ideal. So that's actually brings me on to one of the other things is that Tech Brick were at the show. Now Tech Brick are a company I've had great pleasure dealing with over the years. Tech Brick are a known S-Brick importer for the UK. They also import Trix bricks, and they do a few other bits and pieces as well. And they've now started with Mold King and CADA. And CADA have got this really nifty, what I think they call it a small motor or a micro motor. And it actually has a 2x3 stud footprint for the main housing. And I think it's about 2 bricks or a brick and 2 plates high. And then in addition to that, it's actually got a 2x4 footprint because the axle bit actually extends out another stud also. Now, why am I mentioning CADA motors? Well, the reason being is that I bought 2 at the show to refit the Alco, the high hood, which is the orange and green one. And there'll probably be a video up there somewhere if I can work out how YouTube does it. And that loco originally, when I took it to the show, had 1 power functions M motor in it. This one, to be precise. This is one I took out earlier. And the performance was okay. It would pull 5, 6, 7 freight cars without any problem. It would take a lot of voltage to get there, though, because obviously it's got a lot of, it's only 1 truck that's powered, so you've only got 4 wheels that would work, and the weight's not fairly evenly distributed, and, you got all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. Effectively a lot of science to why it doesn't work properly. Well, these micromotors are so small, because the problem with the Alco, and I think I mentioned it in the video, is that because it's been equipped with the Loco 5 board, the Loco 5 board would effectively is blocking out where one of these motors would sit, because as you can see, it's 6 studs long. It's actually got a 2x6 anti-stud footprint at the base here. So once you've got this in the nose, sort of like that sort of way, sort of thing, when all the wiring and that was in there. Because of this being mounted like that, there's not enough clearance in the hood for me to use the circuit board, because the circuit board would actually be blocking sort of like half the motor. So how do I stop that? Well, I couldn't, because obviously there wasn't anything available at the time. So effectively I just went, well, I'll cut out 1 motor, it'll lose half the horsepower, but at least it'll work, I can got the electrics and that sort of stuff. And it works great. But these new micromotors or small motors from CADA are able to fit in that loco without pretty much no modification. All I had to do was add in an extra 2x4 plate onto where the motor mounts were for them to actually align with the holes to fit and power the motors. And once I'd done that, it was off to the races, because I can now fit 2 motors to that Alco, 1 at the cab end, 1 at the bonnet end, and have the front bogie driven as well. Now, that does not seem like a great improvement, but the motors are smaller, so their top speed I think is less, but their torque is the same. And now that I've fitted both motors to the loco, even with 1 motor on static on just the mouse mat I've got on my desk, it seemed to be performing better. And I was just like, well, it's already got 1 motor, fitting 2 will actually be a lot better. And lo and behold, with 2 motors in, with all the gearing in place, it will now move off on speed step 1 or notch 1 on the throttle. It is amazing. It is really slow speed. Even at step 1, it will crawl along on the R104 curves I've got to test it on. It was really nice and smooth. It was really nice and slow. And all it took was 2 of these small motors at £24 in total. £12 a pop. Now, why am I bringing that up? In this great story sort of thing. And it is effectively the reason I'm bringing it up is because when I convert this back into the 60-ton 300 horsepower version, it is also going to have CADA micromotors in, and eventually it is also going to have a Loco 5 board in it, because the Loco 5 board costs $100. Now that seems like a lot to some people. $100 is a lot in all due respect. But that $100 is the board, the resistors are built into the board, so I don't have to worry about resistance, and I can effectively just cut up a cable and finagle it into the system, so I can adapt the power functions plug, change, when I cut one in half, I can change some of it to be one half to be feeding the motors and the other half to feeding off the battery box. So if I do that, and this board is thinner, it's thinner, it's smaller, what have you, I can actually fit that in. I can wire up both to the smaller motors. The smaller motors take up less space, which is one of the big things that the original model just intended only had the one motor in it. This one, because it's so big, has actually got two, one per bogie, which is why it hauls so much on straight track. So with that board, I can then say the S-brick that I've temporarily fitted in here, the motors are smaller, so these motors can go into other things, and it's just improvement, and it all stacks up to build a smaller model with more features, but a smaller footprint that does more work, and suits the layout better in terms of being a smaller producing. Because if you look at the history of these models, they didn't build many of the 100-ton version. I think they only built, it was less than 10 in total. I think it was something like 7. Long Island had one, and there was about another 6 or so scattered elsewhere. But the 60-ton one was a lot more populous. It was in the hundreds. So having a custom one of those, either lettered for my own railroad or lettered for one in the area, would actually suit the display a lot better. So that's what I'm going to do, is build a 60-ton version, mostly out of some of the parts reclaimed from this one, especially the bogies. The bogies are pretty much going to stay as is, because they were the same pretty much, except for the small powerful motors. And I can rebuild it into a 60-ton 300 horsepower version. It's going to have lights, it's going to have sound, it's going to have 2 motors in it, exactly the same as it is now, but smaller, more compact, similar sort of power, but it's going to fit in a lot better with the display, and it'll look a lot better even though it's shorter. Because it's shorter, it will actually fit in with the display better, and it helps to data, because the 360-ton 300 horsepower one was earlier in terms of age. Now, with that all done, sort of like the post sort of feedback, and we can all neaten that up and take the feedback and shove it into the report, and do what have you with it. I'll just put this over there. Obviously there is a lot of other stuff to consider. So the next show I would have done would have been Milton Keynes Brick Festival, or NK Brick Fest. I think it was the sort of like shorter title. And unfortunately, I've had to pull out of that. Some of the models, as you see in this one, although I started on it, it'll work fine once I rebuild it. There's been some issues with some of the models having damage from transit when they were coming back. So the electric sample, some of those have lost. I think they've lost some of the bearing caps. Nothing major. It's only like a black 1x1 round tile. But I've got to repair some of those. Some of the rolling stock has suffered damage, and it's just a few little bits and pieces where it's just like, yeah, I'm sorry to say, but there's been some damage I've had to pull out. It is what it is. So Mike's been very understanding about that, but it's just a case of A, I can't afford it, B, things are really tight and blah blah blah, and it's a lot of effort to go and do a show, as I've worked out from doing my first one. So it's nice of the offer, but I've got other things to do. And with that said, so really the next sort of several months in terms of my Lego stuff is just literally going to be building buildings and rebuilding this loco, and hopefully finish off some of the rolling stock projects that have been in the works for quite a long time. So that includes applying some of the decals I've got that are just not applied. It's going to be fitting in some of the brake detail, it's going to be doing this, it's going to be doing that, but primarily it's going to be either refurbishing models, decaling them, or building some new buildings and hopefully getting the display a bit more close to completion. So hopefully, fingers crossed, by this time next year everything will be in a lot better position. The layout display will be wired for 9V. Hopefully by then I'll also fitted the 2 electric locos with decoders, so they've got lights and sound themselves. Hopefully a DCC system, I'll have bought one of those as well. Probably a NCE power cab, and I can use that at shows to actually control the electric locos and turn the lights on, and make the horn go and blah blah blah. So with that all said, I've been blabbing a bit. It's now running up to 26 minutes or so on the counter I've got. So with that said, there's plenty to be getting on with. So if you last this longer, thank you for watching. Hopefully you found it informative. And I'll put some links in the description or something to relevant bits and pieces. So that's it from me. Hopefully you've enjoyed all this incessant rambling, and hopefully I'll see you in some content that is coming up soon, I hope. Colds and flus permitting. I'm not feeling very well at the moment, so yeah, so that's it from me, and see you soon.